We're back to talk about the American labor movement and Matthew McConaughey. Let me explain. Remember when McConaughey took off as a serious actor a few years ago with roles in True Detective, Lincoln Lawyer, Dallas Buyers Club, Magic Mike, and chest bump, Wolf of Wall Street? It had a name. It was a McConaissance. Well, now the labor movement is in the midst of its own McConaissance. It was something that we always appreciated but didn't know how big of a deal it was. Unions now represent a larger share of the workforce than any time in the past 5 years, 10.8%. And 68% of Americans now support unions. That's the highest number it's been since the 1960s. And support is especially high among some of the fastest growing sectors of society, African Americans, Hispanics, and young people. President Biden speaking about the importance of labor unions just earlier this month.
The economy my administration is building, instead of workers competing with each other for the jobs that are scarce, everybody's mad at me because now, guess what? Employers are competing to attract workers. When unions win, workers across the board win. That's a fact. Families win, community wins, America wins, we grow.
All right. Unions were a driving force of the middle class for decades, especially once they expanded to allow African Americans and other minorities to take active roles. The road to fighting billionaires and economic inequality starts with American unions. Right now, they're flexing their newfound muscle, with unionizing workers squaring off against giants like Starbucks, Amazon, and even Hollywood. Joining me now to discuss is someone with many, many titles, Dorian Warren, co-president of Community Change, a grassroots activist group, co-chair of the Economic Security Project, and co-host of the System Check podcast, man of many names, many talents. Thank you so much, Dorian, for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thank you so much. So my first question is, where do you think this has come from? Unions, look, President Obama wasn't even always the most supportive person in the world when it came to unions, but they have really seen a comeback in the last 5 or 6 years. Why do you think that's changed, and where is it coming from?
Well, that's a great question to ask me, Jason, on a day like today, because today is the 10th year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. For those of you that remember, that social movement that emerged today in Zuccotti Park in New York with the mantra, remember, the 1% versus the 99%. And so I mention Occupy Wall Street because, as you know, scholars have talked a lot about movement cycles. And so we've been in a decade of a movement cycle of people organizing and joining together to take action to say, no more. This is not, injustice is not acceptable. So if you think of Occupy Wall Street, the next year, we saw the Fight for 15 and a union launch in terms of low-wage fast food workers organizing, huge victories on raising wages, right, in terms of $15 an hour in many places. The last remaining step there is the union part. And so I do think when you think of Occupy Wall Street, you think of the Fight for 15, you think of the movement for Black Lives, you think of Me Too, you think of the climate change activists. We're in a movement cycle. People are mobilizing. And so it's no surprise that workers themselves, whether it's teachers or DoorDash delivery folks or Amazon workers, as you said, or Starbucks workers, people are fed up and they're joining together to say no more, and we can change the conditions that affect our lives.
And also, Dorian, I think what's been happening is some of the language, even if it's not the policy, some of the language about labor unions has begun to change, even from sort of mainline and centrist Democrats. I want you to listen to the sound from Nancy Pelosi. I want your thoughts on the other side.
In America, capitalism is our system, it is our economic system, but it has not served our economy as well as it should. And so what we want to do is not depart from that, but to improve it and to make sure that it serves. You cannot have a system where the success of some springs from the exploitation of the workers and springs from the exploitation of the environment and the rest. And we have to correct that.
That is fantastic to hear from Nancy Pelosi, but I think it's also expanded. We just had a very, very, very aggressive fight for union leadership for SAG-AFTRA, for stars and celebrities just a couple weeks ago. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, the people who put together your Hamiltons, the people who put together your symphonies, they are threatening to strike if they don't see a better contract. Why do you think we've also seen this change in and sort of the entertainment field. That used to be a place where people were like, look, I'm just desperate to work on this play. Why are we even seeing entertainers push now to unionize and protect themselves in our new economy?
Well, we've always had entertainers who have been supportive of the labor movement and of unions. By the way, there's a former Republican president who was a union buster, who was at one point president of the Screen Actors Guild, Ronald Reagan. So there, history is funny like that. But think of it this way, Jason. There are two kinds of union premiums. There's an economic premium you get from joining a union. And particularly if you're a woman or a worker of color or a Black worker, unions, we know, reduce income inequality. They lift wages. You get a range of other benefits, right, related to the workplace, paid sick days, paid holidays. Hey, safety and protection from a pandemic in terms of equipment that essential workers need. If you don't have a collective voice against powerful corporations to say, this is what we need to do our job safely, then people suffer. And I think people are fed up. Americans are fed up. Workers are fed up. There's a second reason why I think we're hearing from people like Speaker Pelosi and the president himself, and that's called the union political premium. Democrats know that if you're a member of a union, you are more likely to turn out and vote. You're also more likely to turn out and vote Democratic. So there is a political imperative for Democratic politicians to support the labor movement. In some cases, they've always been there, but for others that are just waking up, welcome to the party. If you want a democracy, you need a strong labor movement. If you want a middle class, you need a strong labor movement. And so I think it's both the union economic premium and the political premium. The economic premium for ordinary workers who are trying to make ends meet. But the political premium, I think, is the one that politicians pay attention to.
Yeah, I think it's Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi have started to realize, a lot of mainstream Democrats, that unions aren't just the hard hats anymore. There's sometimes white collar folks working at Verizon too. Dorian Warren, thank you so much for joining us this evening.